Howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it's time to talk Path of Exile, and in this video, which is a companion to the introduction to Zana mods video that I posted earlier, I want to go through the information that was released to the community today about what the Zana mods are going to be in Synthesis League, and talk about it from a strategic perspective. So if you're someone who's never got to level 85 in Path of Exile, or you've skipped several leagues and you're not familiar with recent mechanics, you might find that it's worth watching the introduction to Zana mods video that I posted a couple of hours ago as a prerequisite to this one, because I am going to assume that you know what all of these various Zana mods do, and that you'll have a general sense of what Atlas progression feels like. Anyways, the first thing that I noticed when Bex, the community manager for Grinding Gear Games, revealed this information today, a few hours ago, was something is missing. And that thing that is missing is the Abyss League. There is no way to force abysses onto maps using Zana's map mods. And this is something that's been available in a lot of previous leagues. Abysses have a couple of key effects. Firstly, they mean that there will be more Stygian visors in the economy. So the fact that there are widely available, that it's widely possible to force a tier 16 map that you're running to have an abyss on it, means that there is quite a good chance of encountering an abyssal depths, which will have an item level 86 Stygian Vice as the end reward, assuming that you beat the challenges found in that abyss. Which, to be fair, most people that are running tier 16 maps regularly will be doing without much trouble. You will then go through, you'll fight your way through, and at the end, when you kill the Stygian Spire, you will get an item level 86 Stygian Vice if you're in a tier 16 map. These are going to be much rarer in this league. However, I don't think that this effect is going to be quite as significant as some people in the community think. I think that the number of maps, tier 16 maps that players run in general, was suppressed a bit in the Betrayal League. And it was suppressed by the fact that pure breachstones were the best way to gain experience points at endgame. Pure breachstones have been nerfed considerably, and that means that I think players will feel compelled to run more tier 16 maps than they did in the Betrayal League. And so for that reason, I think that there'll be plenty of people running abysses in general. If you're running maps without augmenting them with sextants, then 1 in 10 of your maps will contain an abyss. However, each time that you roll a sextant, you have approximately a 5.5% chance to add the mod, "This area contains 1 additional abyss," which will persist for 3 maps, for 3 runs of that map. Additionally, that sextant mod is something that players generally do not roll over. It's a beneficial mod. And so, in general, because I think that players vary on the amount of sextants that they use. There's a lot of players that generally regard sextants as too expensive and too fiddly to bother with. And there's a lot of players that go, "Oh, I love sextants, I have to use the most of them that I can." I'm going to make an estimate that each tier 16 map that is run is affected by, on average, 1 sextant. And I'm also going to make an estimate that no one rolls over an Abyss Sextant, but that players roll over 20% of the other sextants. These assumptions are guesses, but if they're accurate, then approximately 17% of maps contain an Abyss, which is quite a bit higher. And I would expect that players, by the time they have reached level 92, will have run perhaps 50 tier 16 maps in the Synthesis League. And by the time that you've run 50 tier 16 maps, I would estimate that on average you have encountered 8.5 abysses And from that, you will have looted perhaps 9 or 10 Abyss Jewels of various types, not necessarily the type that you want personally, but 9 or 10 Abyss Jewels total, and maybe 2 or 3 Stygian Vices that are item level 86. So I don't think that there's going to be some tremendous shortage of Stygian Vices going around. I just think that you'll get them later. On the flip side though, what is going to be very rare in this league is the very, very powerful unique items that drop from the Liches. When you clear an Abyssal Depths, there's a chance that you'll encounter a Lich that will replace the Stygian Spire at the end of it. And this Lich, assuming you're able to beat it, just kill the Lich, kill all 3 of its phylacteries, and then finish off the Lich and then take its loot, you have a chance of getting a unique item, and that unique item then has a chance to have 1 or 2 Abyssal Sockets. The more common of the 2 Liches, whose name is something like Ahamanu, he's a physical... He does a lot of physical damage, and he drops a very powerful unique item, Tombfist, which are arguably the best gloves in the game for almost every build that makes attacks with either a bow, with a two-handed weapon, with 2 one-handed weapons, with a one-handed weapon and a shield, or with a wand and a shield, or with dual-wielded wands. Pretty much whatever you're doing, Tombfists are so strong that they are probably the best available choice for you to use, as long as you get the 2-socket version, which is the rarer one. And I think that we will find 2-socket Tombfists will be very rare in this league. Those are going to be incredibly expensive, and that's going to be a direct consequence of the Zana modifiers that Bex outlined today. So keep that in mind. If you get lucky enough to loot one of these early, hold on to it. You will probably be able to sell... I'm going to make a guess that it's going to be of the order 12 to 15 Exalted Orbs by the time that the league matures. So if you get one of these, use it by all means, but hold on to it. Don't recklessly corrupt it. If you're going to corrupt it, then make an informed decision. Look through all of the necessary. Do your due diligence before you corrupt it, and you've got a very powerful, very coveted item, I believe. The same will also be true, but to a lesser extent, for the Bubonic Trail unique boots, which are very powerful. The Light Poacher unique helmet, which is available through a divination card, so won't be quite as rare. And also the Shroud of the Lightless Carnal Armor. So all of that comes about because this league is the first one not to feature Abyss in quite some time. Anyways, going through the various options. The first option is just simply gaining increased item quantity for not using a Zana mod. This starts at 1% and scales up to 8% as you complete more and more of Zana's questline. And it's a pretty strong passive incentive for just beating Zana's questline. This is an opportunity cost for using any of the other mods, because you only get to choose one of the options, and you either take this or you take one of the options that cost you something. As a general rule of thumb, that will factor into your decisions, and quite often it will be the right choice to not add a Zana mod. In particular, I will say that it is almost always going to be the right option not to add a Zana mod if you have Valja map and the Val Orb has not done anything spectacular. So if the outcome of the Valing is a 4, 5 or 6 mod rare map, then I think in general cases you're not going to apply any Zana mods to it. Next up is Fortune Favors the Brave, which picks one of the old League mods, so anything from Nemesis to Beyond, at random. I don't know if it's capable of picking alternate same tier, Shaped, or Elder. I've never really tested it. I don't feel that the cost-benefit ratio weighs up on this. Early in the league, it is a way to get access to Beyond or Harbinger, but unreliably, and it's not at some big discount. Additionally, Fortune Favors the Brave uh, runs the risk of giving you the wrong map mod for your character setup, or also just a mod that doesn't synergize with the rest of the map. So, for instance, you put in a map that's got Beyond already on it, just as a map mod. If you were to get Beyond if you were to choose Beyond from the map device, that would synergize a lot with the Beyond mod that is on your map already. It would give you a double chance to get a pile of Beyond poo when you kill a monster, which will then tremendously escalate the amount of Beyond packs that will spawn and Beyond bosses. However, it's unreliable and you can't play off that synergy. So for that reason, I'm going to say don't use Fortune Favors the Brave, with the exception of if you just want to experience, if you think that you're not going to get to far enough in Zana's questline to unlock the higher tier mods, so Breach, Harbinger, Beyond, which I think might be gated behind a fair bit of Zana's storyline. If you're playing the League more casually, you don't think you're going to get that far in Zana's storyline, then by all means, use Fortune Favors the Brave just so that you can experience those mods. But from a min-maxing perspective, I think there is no reason to use this. Next up is Alternate of the same tier, from tier 1 to 10. This is the most significant Zana mod for the early Atlas exploration phase. I divide up my Atlas, my Atlas of Worlds interactions into 3 phases. There's exploration, which is when you haven't unlocked all that many maps and your goal is just to work your way closer to the center of the Atlas, unlock maps, build up your Atlas bonus so that your map drops are augmented for the rest of the league. Then there is Atlas final setup, which is where your second phase, which is where you're trying to fill in the last holes in your Atlas. You're trying to get yourself into position for whatever ultimate farming strategy you're using. So perhaps this Atlas setup phase, if you're running a shaped Atlas strategy that is around the map beach, for instance, the tier 4 map beach, if you were to decide you want to run the tier 9 version of beach, your setup phase will entail deleting uncompleting all of the tier 9 and tier 10 maps except for Shape Beach, so that every tier 9 or tier 10 drop that drops for you is a Shape Beach map. Now, I don't actually recommend this strategy, but if it was something you wanted to do, this would be part of your setup phase. However, at the same time, you would want to complete lots of tier 11, 12, and 13, 14, 15, 16 maps so that you can get your Atlas bonus as high as possible. In any case, Alternate of the same tier is absolutely what you should be using throughout the whole of the Atlas exploration phase. Every time that you are opening a map that you already have the Atlas bonus on, that is from tier 1 to 10, and that there are 3 or more maps of that tier that you have not completed but that you do want to have completed on your Atlas, I would suggest you use Alternate of the same tier. This will tremendously speed up the process of unlocking everything on the Atlas, and getting yourself to a point that your Atlas bonus is at least 90, ideally 120. Once you get to that point, you'll reach a spot where you no longer need to keep doing this. If you're in a trade league, I would suggest that because 1 Chaos is such a cheap price to pay, and because this doesn't require the time of actually going to forming a group with another player, going to their hideout, and conducting a trade, I would suggest you keep doing this until you're down to the last 2 maps of a tier. At that point, then you want to buy them, those last 2 maps. Alternately, if you're in solo self-found, I'm not an expert on the solo self-found situation, but I would suggest in that case that you probably use this even more. In any case, this is going to be your primary outlet for Chaos Orbs early in the league. Remember that if you've been following my Day 1 economic strategies video, you're going to want to get your Atlas, or you're going to want to be selling maps early. And one of the key things that helps you sell maps early is having more of them and having higher tier maps to sell. Ultimately, the same tier will fill out your Atlas bonus so that you've got more to sell. It's win-win all round. You should be using this a lot, but then you should also get to a point where you completely outlevel it and you stop using it. I would go as far as to say that you probably want to rush unlocking this option on the Atlas. We don't yet know the exact mechanics by which you will unlock it. If it's similar to the Betrayal League, I believe in the Betrayal League, all you needed to do to get this unlocked was to complete an Elder Influence Tier 6 map, although I could be wrong on that. It may well be the case that you want to aggressively rush towards that goal. However, that will become clearer when we get the full patch notes, and also when I confirm that what exactly was gated behind in the Betrayal League. Next up, we have the two mods which I'll group together, the shape mods. These have a tremendous impact during the first week. These will transform the entire economy of a trade league. The shape tier 1 to tier 5 mod ensures that as long as you have tier 4 and tier 5 maps, you can never run out of tier 9 and tier 10 maps to run. You should be using this aggressively once you unlock it, which in the Betrayal League required you to complete a tier 10 Elder Influenced map, which is the 5th or the 6th Shape of Memory fragment. But it's a tier 10 Elder Influence map. You should very aggressively rush towards that goal. That should be one of the first things you want to do during your time on the server, or during your time on the first day of the league, so Saturday the 8th of March if you're in my time zone, potentially even the 7th of March if you're in the United States, or particularly Hawaii. You want to get there as quickly as you possibly can, and then what you want to be doing is grabbing all your tier 5 maps, running them as tier 10s using this mod, and then selling the tier 9, 10, and 11 maps that drop from monsters in that zone. You want to be selling them to other players that are further behind in progression than you. You will be able to get an absolute premium for these maps, and this will really help you get a kickstart in building up currency for yourself. On the flip side, if you're not at the cutting edge of progression, so let's say that you get to running tier 10 maps perhaps on the 3rd or 4th day of the league, they'll no longer, or even considerably later, like maybe you get there in the 3rd week. In that case, you won't get as much out of this option. Generally, you will be able to purchase tier 10 maps on the market from other players for anywhere from 3 to 5 Chaos Orbs, if my memory serves me correctly from the prices that were experienced during the Betrayal League. This will be your way to go instead, and you'll basically ignore that this mod exists. You can just go, alright, jump into Trade Channel 159, which is a popular hangout for players that want to buy, sell, and trade maps, and with quite a focus on one-for-one trading. So, you know, if you've got a bog and you want a chateau, you just type join the Trade Channel 159 and then say have bog, want chateau, and put a little tier 11 in there so people know what it is, and probably someone will take you up on it pretty quickly. And so if you get to tier 10 maps a bit later than the cutting edge of progression, so if the league's been live more than about 24 hours when you get to tier 10 maps, then in that case, I would say largely ignore this option. Lastly, if you're in solo self-found, this will be one of your main uses for your Chaos Orbs that you've been looting all the way through the game. There will be a lot of value to you in using those Chaos Orbs to basically kickstart your map pool. The higher tier version of this, the version that turns a tier 10 map into a tier 15, is another huge economic impactor. And this requires you to complete a tier 15 Elder Influence map to unlock in the Betrayal League. I can't guarantee that that will be the same in Synthesis, but time will tell on that. But what you want to do with this, if you can get there first, ahead of the server, there is a huge, and you don't need to be dead first, but you need to be in the first, in the first few hundred players to get to this point in progression. You will be able to start selling tier 16 Guardian maps, and they will sell for 3/4 of an Exalted Orb, even a full Exalted Orb early in the league. What you want to do is complete your tier 15 Elder Influence map as you're required to do in order to unlock this. Then you want to complete a tier 16 map. The reason you want to do this is because you can, the only maps that can drop, if you're in, say, picking a tier 10 map, Belfry, if you're in a shaped Belfry, the only maps that can drop are maps that you've already completed or maps that are directly adjacent to Belfry on the Atlas of Worlds. And those are all tier 9 or tier 11. So, if a monster rolls a tier 16 drop, so for instance, you kill a magic monster, you get lucky, you get a map, and then you get very lucky and it's a tier 16, and let's say that the only tier 15 you've done is Lava Lake at this point, and that was your Elder Influence map. If you're lucky and you roll a tier 16, but you haven't killed any tier 16 map bosses, then that tier 16 will be downgraded to being a Lava Lake. Lava Lake is fine, you're pretty happy to get that, but it's not as valuable as getting a, say, a Pit of the Chimera map would be at that point. So for that reason, this mod is something that you want to rush towards. Once you've unlocked it, do one tier 16 map. If you're really desperate, do it without even making it a corrupt rare. You can even do it as a magic map. So, you can just go, okay, I'm just going to roll this map using Alteration Orbs until I get a Bloodlines, because, your character's really weak this early in the league. Let's say that you get a Forge of the Phoenix map. You're like, okay, I'm just going to roll it until I get 2 mods that don't augment the boss. And then at that point, I'll clear the map. I'll kill the Phoenix using my player skill rather than my character stats. Dodge his big attacks, and be very cautious about the fight. But then once you've done that, you'll then be able to get Forge of the Phoenix maps anytime that you run a tier 15 map, even if it's not one that's connected to the Forge of the Phoenix. At that point, go through all your tier 10 maps and run them with this mod. You won't have enough Chaos Orbs that you've personally looted, but that's fine. Start selling your other maps in order to fund more of them. When you've done this for a bit, you will find yourself absolutely swimming in currency if you're able to do this on the first day of the league. To give you a sense of just how much currency you can make out of this, one of the most successful groups at the start of the Delve League. Now, I wasn't able to play at the start of the Delve League. I was interstate on at a conference, and I just had to spectate. So after my day at the conference, I then went back to my hotel room and fired up the stream of some of the most successful players in that league. So I was watching Havoc's stream, I was watching Empyrean Gaming's stream, and what was really noticeable was watching Empyrean's team sell all of their spare maps, their tier 16 maps, and they sold so many of them that they were able to fund more than a Mirror of Calandra, all from the maps that they looted in the first 24 hours, just by selling them to other players really quickly, really early on. And that was all done by using this mod to turn their so their tier 10s could drop tier 14, 15, and 16 maps. And 6 Chaos a run was nothing to them. They were making that back in spades. Now later in the league, this stops being as powerful. Very early on, you can typically sell tier 16 maps for as much as 30, 40 Chaos Orbs. And at that point, 30 or 40 Chaos Orbs is a very large fraction of an Exalted Orb. It can be 3/4, it can be a whole Exalted Orb. By the time that the economy settles out, I am expecting in this league that, and this is without even knowing what the synthesis content is going to do in terms of pumping maps into the economy. I'm expecting that tier 16 maps will be under 20 Chaos Orbs again in this league. Potentially even as low as 12 or 13, like they have been through the whole second half of the Betrayal League. So at that point, this is not going to be as worthwhile to use. In that situation, I would say to people, if you're running a build that is unaffected by map mods, then perhaps consider continuing to use this and only have a couple of high-value tier 15 maps unlocked, and then just sell them all in bulk. But if you don't want to mess around, then by all means, don't bother keeping using this. I think there's going to be a 1 week window of opportunity in which you can make yourself a lot of currency by abusing this mod. After that, it's going to be more of a use this if you feel like it, but it's not some massive loss to not use it. Next up is the big daddy of this series of 3 map level augmenting mods, the Elder mod. Cost of 15 Chaos Orbs is pretty high. My general strategy for this throughout the trail has been to use it only when my daily Nico mission has spawned in a zone that's very low level. So for instance, for a whole period I was leveling up an alternate character that ended up being a failed experiment. They were a elemental hit scion that was trying to experiment with using elemental equilibrium and both cold and fire damage. So the first hit would be cold, the second would be fire. Anyways, the character was a disappointment, and they didn't make it far through the Atlas. But when they got into maps, they were generally running tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maps. And sometimes I'd run one of those maps, and then I'd say, "Oh, I just killed the boss of a tier 3 map. Now Nico has spawned on another tier 3 map." At that point, I would log out, I would jump onto my main character, my Arc Trapper, and go to that level 3 map and juice it up for 15 Chaos. And essentially what I'm getting there is almost a rusted Sulfite Scarab worth of value. I get Nico on a random tier 16 map that that will have random mods, so it's not quite as good as actually using a Scarab, but it did add up and it was significant. That's the only real use case that I see for this Elder mod, with the other exception being if you've just got a map that you really like running and you just want to have a bit of a challenge on it, then by all means juice it up to 16. 15 Chaos is a fair bit, but you will typically get maybe 0.5 tier 16 returns, 0.5 tier 15 returns, 0.4 tier 14 returns. These aren't figures that I can back up with science. These are just my gut feeling for the statistics. But all of that will typically give you most of, if not all of, your 15 Chaos back. So it's not like you're spending a tremendous amount to use it. So by all means, use it for a bit of fun here and there. But from a strategic min-maxing perspective, I would suggest you only use this on maps that have your daily Nico on them. Whereas the shape tier 1 to 10 is something that you can use a lot more. Now let's jump to Nemesis. Nemesis is something that has had a huge impact on the economy every time it's been available as a Zana mod. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, it allows Headhunter to drop as a unique item. I'm actually considering, I don't think I'm going to go ahead with this, but I am considering going and running maps with a Magic Find character that puts Nemesis on every mod, on every single map, and an unusual Magic Find character that stacks both increased item quantity and increased item rarity. Increased item rarity is a stat that experienced players generally don't care about at all, but it does dramatically increase your chances of getting uniques and the number of uniques that you get. It doesn't make you comparatively more likely to get a rarer unique than a more common unique. So for instance, the ratio of worms molts to headhunters that you get will stay the same with item rarity and without item rarity, but the number of unique items that you get will dramatically increase, and therefore your chances of getting the headhunter unique belt will increase considerably with high item rarity, high item quantity, and the Nemesis mod in every zone. I don't actually think I'm going to go ahead with this. I think it's just going to stay at the level of a thought experiment in my mind, but it's something to consider. Alternately, Nemesis has been used by players to... if you're in a zone that has Zana's Nemesis mod, Chance Orbs are able to create a headhunter. This is something that is pretty rare. In fact, very rare. The Chance Orbs respect the rarity of the unique you're trying to chance. So, for instance, chancing a Worm's Molt is a very common outcome if you take a unique belt into one of these maps, whereas chancing a Headhunter is a very rare outcome. Additionally, as well as being able to use Chance Orbs to get a Headhunter, you can also use Ancient Orbs to get a Headhunter. These use cases are they're going to be interesting to see how much people do them. In the past, Nemesis was considered so powerful for a period that players actually paid an Exalted Orb. For a whole period of time, the only way you could get a Headhunter in quite a number of leagues, this is before divination cards, so before the not the Fall of Oriath expansion, the previous one, the one that introduced divination cards and Act 4. Before that expansion, the only way that you could get Headhunter was to activate the Nemesis mod, which back then cost an Exalted Orb. Even then, players used to go in with an inventory full of Chance Orbs, Scouring Orbs, and a couple of leather belts, and they would try to scour and chance repeatedly, hoping to get that magical headhunter, to land that magical headhunter. This is something that players will definitely do again. I'm not actually sure if it's the best way to get a headhunter these days. I believe probably the best way to get that is by farming the tower map and using a high investment mapping strategy, which allows you to make more steady progress. The Chance Orb strategy is more luck dependent. However, just running maps, and you do have the chance for any monster that you kill does have that chance to drop the Headhunter belt as well. This is going to be used a lot by players, whether or not it is the best way to get Headhunter in the league. It's going to be used a lot. I'm still not sure how I'm going to interact with this, but I think in general, the fact that it's only 2 Chaos Orbs means that it's a pretty good default option. If you don't have anything else to use on the map device, but you're not running a low tier map, then I'll probably suggest just throwing Nemesis on it. Furthermore, if you're running an 8 mod map, even though it's going to cost you 2 Chaos Orbs and 2 Val Orbs, I think that Nemesis may still be worth your while considering in that case. Again, solely for the chance of hitting Headhunter, but you also get the bonus of having more rare monsters on the map as well. Next up is Bloodlines, and as I mentioned in the introductory video, Bloodlines increases the number of magic monsters on the map, and a large percentage of the maps that you get that are 1 tier higher than the map you're currently running will drop from magic monsters. The only things that can drop are +1 maps, so if you're in a tier 12 map, the only things that can drop a tier 13 are the map boss, various unique monsters throughout the map, various rare monsters throughout the map, and magic monsters. Magic monsters have considerably increased item quantity, which means they are considerably more likely to drop a map than a white monster is. And if that map drops, it has a reasonable chance of being a +1.
Bloodlines, in addition to giving every magic monster on the map a potentially dangerous at least bloodline mod, it will also increase the number of magic monsters that are on the map. And for that reason, historically it was a very popular choice for increasing the amount of maps that drop when you're running a map. I don't think it's quite as good as it used to be, and the reason for that is that a few leagues ago it was changed to no longer grant 20% item quantity. So now you are choosing between either getting your 1 to 8% increased item quantity or getting your bloodlines bonus. Whereas back in the old days it used to be 8% or 20% plus bloodlines. And that said, bloodlines does cost 1 chaos less than I remember it costing. And it was sort of a no-brainer when it cost 3 chaos orbs and it gave you both 20% quantity and the additional monsters on the map. I would suggest you consider using bloodlines very, very early in a league when you've not yet worked your way up to tier 10 maps. At this point, you will really want to rush to doing your first tier 10 Elder Influence map, as I was mentioning in the earlier in the video when talking about the shaped mods. And for that reason, running your maps with bloodlines will help you work your way closer to the center of the atlas. However, it's a balance between using your chaos orbs for this reason or saving them so that you can use them on the shaped tier 1 to 5 mods. I don't have the answer as to which is better of these. I think it's just going to be a case of players are just going to have to try it. Try both, experiment, find out what works, and go with it. Ambush. Okay, Ambush has historically, been something that is extremely powerful in conjunction with one specific sextant modifier. If you're using sextants on maps, there is a common sextant modifier. It's not a rare one. At least historically it hasn't been rare. That increases sextant. It increases monsters contained in strongboxes. It gives them plus 500% increased item quantity. It also makes them a bit tougher. Whenever you roll this sextant, I think you should always use ambush. And not just use ambush, but you should also augment the augment the chests, not to have more desirable items the way that players normally roll strongboxes in maps, but instead roll them with a focus on getting more monsters in them. One of the rolls that's fairly common on any type of strongbox contains a pack of magic monsters. That's the best option, but even short of that, you can get an extra pack of monsters. You can get 3 additional rare monsters. All of these are good, and they work really well with ambush, throwing additional throwing additional strongboxes on the map. If you don't have that strongbox, I don't think you get that great a return from running ambush on your maps. However, by all means, experiment with it and prove me wrong if you want. There is still a chance of getting a Divinus strongbox, which are pretty rare. When you get them, they are worth potentially, on average, I think a Divinus Strongbox seems to drop about half an Exalted Orb worth of Divination cards for me. That will vary. There's a lot of randomness in it, and a good part of that half of an Exalt is the miracle hits, like when you get an entire Doctor card. But you'll get lots of things that will add up on Divinus Strongbox. You could also hit a Cartographer's Strongbox. You could hit a couple of Arcanist Strongboxes. So lots of ways that you can make 3 Chaos back. And then there is that Sextant that is absolutely staggering value. If you want to see what a map looks like with that Sextant and with lots of extra Strongboxes forced onto it, have a look for my video on an introduction to high investment mapping. It shows a tower map in which I believe I have that Sextant mod and 6 or maybe 7 or 8 Strongboxes spawn in it. And you just see the staggering amounts of loot that drop from each of them. Alright, next up we have Essence. I don't believe Essence is going to be worth running. It has been upgraded. It now gives you 3 Essence packs instead of 2.
but I still don't think it's very good. Essences are just pretty much obsoleted by fossils as crafting materials. They're not completely obsoleted, but they're pretty close to it. And essentially, yeah, there's a couple of them that are still worth something. The only exception will be if there is a league challenge to release an Essence of Hysteria, an Essence of Delirium, an Essence of Insanity, one of the top tier corrupted essences. In that case, if you're in a trade league, you might want to use Essence a few times in order to basically try and sell that achievement to other people. That's the only scenario in which I see this being worthwhile. I think that in general, essences are so widely available, with them dropping in murmuring lockboxes in the Delve Mines with quite a high degree of frequency. Players are swimming in them, and there's not really any incentive to use them, so I don't think they're very good. Next up we have Breach. We all love Breach. It's a real moment of an adrenaline rush in a map, and it puts a staggering amount of extra monsters on the map. Breach also interacts quite well with the Syndicate content. Although the Purified Breach Stones have been nerfed in this league, they're still going to be very, very, very powerful. And so for that reason, I expect there'll be a considerable market for the Splinters and for the completed Breach Stones, as well as that every single one of the Breach Lords, with the exception of Ul Natol, has at least one powerful item that is in high demand. Esh drops the Hand of Wisdom in Action, is the upgraded version. Zoff drops Zoff's Blood, and Tull drops the Pandemonious, and Chayula drops both the the Presence of Chayula Amulet and the Skin of the Loyal. Not the upgraded version, Skin of the Lords is terrible, but the Skin of the Loyal unique robe. So that's 5 very good items. Now they vary in price. The Hand of Wisdom in Action will be too common for demand after the first few days of the league. Very early on, it'll be quite valuable. But all of these will be items that players will want, and so running Breach on your maps should, as long as that demand holds up, I think it's something that will be really worth considering. Additionally, breaches are fun. And breaches seem, in my experience, to drop a lot of divination cards and a lot of raw currency. Particularly if you're running them with a build that is stacking lots of Magic Find. So for that reason, yeah, I think Breach is going to be another good choice for the default. You're not sure what to put on a map, then consider Breach as an option. Next up we have Harbinger, which really serves the same purpose of Breach. It's just that it has different special rewards. Instead of giving you fragments that build together a Breach Stone that then allows you to loot some powerful uniques, Harbinger will drop Harbinger Orbs and Ancient Orbs as its 2 main additional rewards, and then Exalted Shards sometimes as well. We'll forget Mirror Shards exist. They're just so rare that you can ignore their existence. The Ancient Orbs, I think, will be in much more demand this league than they have been in previous ones, because you have access to the Nemesis mod, so they can be used to basically. I think a lot of the estimates flowing around the community are that you have a 1 in 400 chance to generate a Headhunter when you use an Ancient Orb upon a unique belt. I don't know if this is accurate. I'm just going to assume that it is. On that basis, an Ancient Orb is 1/400th of a Headhunter. That's something that's of quite considerable value. It can also be used very early in the league to generate the Lycosidae unique shield, although I expect that will be an opportunity that dries up quite quickly. Finally, we have Beyond, which I think anyone that's ever had a Headhunter knows just how much fun it is to run through basically to run through a map that has Beyond on it as a murder machine. Every time, all of the rare monsters that spawn from the Beyond goo,
All of those will have an enormous amount of mods that you can leech, and you then just become this wrecking ball that has a haste aura, that has a vitality aura, that has a discipline aura, and that can just fly through the map at lightning speed, feeling invincible, killing everything that comes your way, and basically turning some of the overpowered skills that some of the monsters have against them. Generally speaking, I don't think Beyond is worth using unless you've got, if not a Headhunter, at least the Inspired Learning Jewel, which is the considerably nerfed alternative to Headhunter. 4 Chaos Orbs adds up pretty quickly, and it doesn't add much loot to the map. It does, however, add a lot of experience. Beyond will be used by players that are trying to push for rapid level 100s in the league. They will be using this to add a lot of extra monsters onto fairly safe maps. Maps they feel confident that they can handle any of the Beyond bosses except for Abaxoth if they encounter them in it. Beyond also is just chaotic and a lot of fun. So for that reason, definitely give it a couple of shots, but I would only use it regularly if you've got a Headhunter equipped on your character, and if your character is a go fast, go faster type build. Anyways, that's the last of the Zana mods. The most significant thing, as I mentioned, was the absence of Abyss. I think that will be really noticed, but I also think that the player base is perhaps slightly overreacting to it because Abysses do appear quite a bit in regular play, and players only really need about 6 or 7 Abyss jewels. And while some players are going to want Searching Eye, some are going to want Murderous Eye, some are going to want Hypnotic Eye, and a small number will want Ghastly Eye, you can generally trade with each other. Searching Eye will be the most desirable and the rarest, and will feel the rarest because they all seem to be drop with the same drop rate. But even then, I think by the time you hit level 92, 93, 94, if you're mostly running tier 16 maps, you will have all of the item level 83 Abyss jewels that you want. It's just a matter of then going out and crafting them. Either you can do that crafting yourself, or you can sell a basis to someone that is doing that crafting and then just buy the completed product from them. So yeah, Abyss, the biggest thing though, from the absence of Abyss, is going to be Tombfist. Tombfist is going to be far too rare for the demand that will be in the league. Even with the meta shifting, I expect that there'll be a lot of popularity for spellcasters, because big theme of this synthesis expansion is going to be people self-casting spells, and that's there's that huge balance pass that's happening. Even then, I think the Tombfist unique gloves will be undersupplied and will be worth a lot. The other big takeaway from this video is that these shaped mods are worth rushing towards. If you're ahead of the curve for progression, then you want to run those, and you want to make as much currency as you can quickly by selling maps to people that are behind you in progression. Otherwise, consider Nemesis, consider Breach, consider Harbinger, and consider Beyond for most of your maps. And good luck with your loot.